You gotta flip. Um, so, anyways, like I was saying, we mentioned one baptism this morning, and I forgot to mention this in first service, but last week on spring retreat, we had two baptisms. Two of our teens decided to give their life to Christ, and so that was awesome. So, yeah, you can clap for that if you all want to. So it was awesome. One was Isabella Torres. One was oh, Dorian. I'm sorry, Dorian. And I saw Isabella here this morning, and I think Dorian was here too. But they're two new students that have been coming over the last several months, just because our teens invited them to come and be a part. And so I just think it's awesome to see how God works through relationships like that and what He's doing. So it's a great morning. It's another reason it's a great morning is because I had a pretty awesome surprise this morning. So I sat down after I got done preaching in first service, and we sang our last songs and had our closing prayer, and I looked back, and my dad was sitting there. And my mom and dad read in the bulletin online that I was going to be preaching, so they showed up and decided to surprise me. So that was pretty awesome. And that reminds me of another time. I wasn't going to tell this story, but it reminds me of another time. Whenever I was 19 years old, I was a freshman at Lubbock Christian University, who, by the way, just won the NCAA Division II National Championship. So good job for Texas Tech, but also good job for LCU. I was a freshman at Lubbock Christian University, and I had to have my appendix out. And I don't remember much from the week after that, because I was basically unconscious for a week. But at that point, my parents were living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I remember waking up long enough to say hi to my dad, who had flown in from Atlanta to see me in the hospital, and then I fell back asleep. And so he flew in to hear me say the word hi and fall back asleep. And so it's just kind of the parents I have. So, anyways, I really am glad y'all are here. I'm glad to be here this morning. And it's getting to the time of year that if you have kids in school, whatever age, it doesn't matter. It seems like all the way down to kindergarten now, it's crunch time. And we're done with spring break, and we're kind of white-knuckling it, trying to make it to the end of the year, trying to make it to summer. And there's projects that are due, and there's finals that are coming up, and there's all these things. And so we're kind of in crunch time. And so my kids come home with homework every night, and I have become the math guy. And I was not the math guy in junior high and high school. I never even took a math class in college. I figured out a way to avoid that. I was never a math guy, but I've become the math guy. And I'll tell you this, I love it now. I wish that I would have had this same love for math that I did whenever I was in school, because sitting down with my kids, like, I'm excited when it's math time. Like, I'm like, all right, this is going to be fun. Let's figure this out. And it's like a puzzle to me. It's like figuring out how all the pieces work. And, I'm 38 years old, and I have these aha moments. Like, oh, I understand how this fraction became this. Like, all of a sudden, it makes sense to me. And so I love sitting down with my kids. They are not as excited about doing the homework as I am at this point, but I look forward to that every night. I've also gotten to be pretty good at skimming history worksheets to find answers for who led this battle in this year, and they're like, I can't find it anywhere, and I can skim that book, and I can find the answer in like 30 seconds. I'm like, it's right here in this paragraph. Go read it. And so it's fun for me. And those are the kind of things that my oldest two kids bring home, Will and Katie. My youngest son, he brings homework home, but the things that he wants to talk about when he comes home from school are not math and science and history. I'm not even sure he knows that he sat through those things while he was in school. But the things that he wants to talk about are if there was an assembly that day and someone came and talked about something special. Like, he loves those things. And so I remember a couple years ago, he came home and he was very excited to tell us all about, Papa, did you know that there are sometimes foods and there's all the time foods? And he told me all about how cookies are sometimes food, but vegetables and fruits, those are all the time foods. And so then every time we'd go to the grocery store, we'd talk about sometimes foods, always foods. And he said, Cokes are sometimes food. Water is an all the time food. And so he tells us all these things. One time he came home and there had been an assembly about fire safety in the home. And he was very excited for us to come up with our escape routes. We had to know exactly how we were going to get out of the house in case of a fire. We had to know where we were going to meet. if we all got separated and we had to go different ways, we even had to get on Amazon and look for rope ladders to have by all of our windows. Even though it was a one-story house, it didn't matter. We had to at least look and figure it out because the fireman had come and he told us we need to have all these things figured out. And so he loves those kind of things. He gets that from me. I remember whenever the door-to-door vacuum salesman would come by the house, that was the best day of the year. And I would watch that demonstration and see how much dirt would come in the little black felt pieces of fabric. They were like, oh, look how dirty our floor is, Mom. It's incredible. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. I love the demonstration stuff. And so he gets that from me. But he came home and we were talking about this fire, and it got me thinking. In the event of a fire, and I'm sure you've all had this question, it's kind of the what if question. If there was a fire, what would you want to save? What would you want to grab? And so I thought about showing you some pictures of some things, but instead I decided to actually bring the things that I would save. And so do y'all mind if I show you some of my things that I would save? We all want to see it? That's not very enthusiastic, but okay, here. I'll show you. First thing that I would save is this, all right? This is a family portrait of my family, and I love it. And I love it because it's different, it's weird, it's kind of funky. And more than that, I love it because a dear friend of mine did this for us. She's a girl that we've known ever since she was in college, and she's grown up now, but she's an artist. She does a lot of awesome things. And so one year I think it was Megan's birthday, I asked if she could do a family portrait in this style. And so I love it because of who made it, because of who's in the picture. I love it because I can look at all these faces and I see the personality of my family coming through. And I can see that. Russell Winkley came over to our house the other day, and he thought these were all just different versions of Megan. And so not everyone can see what I see whenever I look at it, but that's fine because it's my family portrait, and I love it. I would want to save this. Another thing I would save, I got a little emotional in first service when I was talking about this, and so I'll try to keep my composure this time. But it's another painting. It's done by the same person, but this is my dog Ralph. All right, and Ralph died, I guess, about 4 years ago. I don't remember when. It was a long time ago, and it made me very sad. I loved Ralph so much. Ralph was a girl. And so we had decided we want a dog named Ralph, and whenever we went to pick her out, all they had was girls. And so I was like, oh, well, she won't know. She doesn't know what a boy's name or a girl's name is. And so we named her Ralph, and she was the best dog. She's not the smartest dog, but she was the best dog. And I still remember the day she died, how sad I was. And like she was walking across the floor, and she just kind of laid down in a way that I had never seen her lay down, and I knew something was wrong. She was old. We bought Ralph whenever we were maybe 3 months into our marriage, and so she was with us through all of our moves and all of our kids and everything like that. And so I just remember she laid down, and I remember laying down on the floor and just kind of petting her while she took her last few breaths, and it was a very sad night. And so a couple years ago, Megan commissioned our friend to paint this for me, and I keep this where I can see it every day because I love Ralph. There, I made it. Another thing that I would save is this right here, and I don't know if y'all know what this is. This is an Apple TV, all right? And this is my connection to just about everything. This is where I get my Netflix and my Hulu and my YouTube and everything. And I love this, and this is not just because I love movies and TV shows, which I do. I love great stories about good versus evil. I love stories about broken people being redeemed, and you can find all kinds of great stories on all those things. It's inspiring. I love it. But this is also just kind of represents just a general love for technology. I love technology. Whenever I can figure out a way to make a computer do something, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore, I love it. And so I would want to save my technology. I don't know if that's going to stay there. We'll see. Don't fall down. Another thing, this was kind of, as I was looking through, I really like this right here. This is my sword. Oh! Does anyone know what the name of this sword is? It's Sting, that's right. So this is Sting. This is This is Bilbo Baggins' sword, and then he gave it to his nephew Frodo Baggins for their epic journeys through Middle Earth. And I love those stories. Again, I'm a big story guy. One of the things that I love about this too is it's really sharp, and we figured that out on accident. Like the day I bought it, Will was, I don't know, 7 or 8, somewhere around there, old enough that I should have told him better. Okay, but he picked up the sword and he put his hand just like this, and then just ran it straight up, and we figured out, oh, that's sharp. I think he was the first one to hold it, but that's kind of Will. The first several times he held a knife, he cut himself with it, and so he's just. So anyways, that's a memory that I have, and I associate with this, and I love it. I would want to save it. And then probably this is my most prized possession. Okay, this is the thing that most of these things I would be sad if I lost them. If I lost this, I would be devastated. This is my guitar, but it wasn't always my guitar. For a long time, it was my dad's guitar. And now that he's sitting here, I can't look over there. I remember listening to him play this guitar in our basement in Montana. I remember our dog peeing all over the case of this guitar and messing it up. I still have that case. I remember thinking how awesome my dad was because someone had asked him to play guitar in their wedding. Hold on a second. And I just remember thinking like that, my dad's the coolest guy in the world. And then a few years later, my sister got married, and she asked my cousin Lan, some of y'all know him, asked my cousin Lan to play guitar in her wedding, and that really hurt my feelings because she did not ask me, but she was kind of right not to. I was not very good at the guitar at that point. I hadn't really put in the work. And so, but I was like, I'm going to play the guitar at my sister's wedding. And so I called Dad and I said, Dad, would you bring your guitar when you come for Heather's wedding? And he did. And I kind of fuddled through and made it through. There's another guy that was there. His name was Mark Hadley. He was singing in the wedding, and it was his job to hold the microphone at the guitar. And then when I messed up, to pull it away real fast. And so he did that several times while we were going through. But then, whenever Mom and Dad were about to get back on the plane and fly home, Dad said, why don't you just keep it? And so this became my guitar. And hopefully, someday, it'll either be Will's or Katie's or Clark's, whoever actually takes up an interest in music. We'll see what happens. But I love this. I would want to save this if there was a fire. And so, if there was a fire and I ran through the house and I grabbed all of these things, all right, and I don't even know. I did it in first service. We'll see if I can do it again, second service. So if I went through the house and I grabbed all of this and I went to the meeting place that we had agreed upon, and I said, Megan, don't worry, I got it all. Megan's going to have some questions, right? And her first question is going to be, where are the children? Right? And no matter how hard I try to explain to her how much these things, how much these things mean to me. No matter how many stories I tell, and I mean, you heard, all of these stories are tied to memory, all right? These bring back memories whenever I hold all of these things. No matter how much I try to explain to her that these things are important and that these things are valuable, none of it matters if I've let our children perish. And I wonder sometimes if when we stand before God, holding on to a lot of things that maybe don't really matter, and he says, you held on to all those things instead of saving my children? I wonder how we're going to answer that question. Let me see if I can set these down here. Because there are a lot of things that we hold on to that get in the way of us saving people. And I don't want to get to heaven and stand before God holding on to all these things, and some good and some bad. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we hold on to. I don't want to get there holding on to all these things and saying, I couldn't grab your kids to save them because all of these things were too important to me. All right? And whenever we talk about this, the first thing that we usually talk about when we talk about holding on to things is we talk about holding on to our sin. And so I want to talk about that just for a little bit, but I don't want to spend a lot of time there. Sin is not just a problem, it is the problem. It is the only problem. It is the reason that Jesus came to earth, is to save us from our sins, because sin leads to destruction and it leads to death. And Jesus does not want for us to suffer the cruelty that sin inflicts on our lives. I want to look at a passage in Galatians. And just to set this up, this is a story. Paul is talking about a conflict that he had with Peter. All right? And in this time, after Jesus had done his ministry, done all of his teaching, and he had been crucified, resurrected, ascended, and now all of his followers are left here. Jesus is gone, and they're left on earth, and they're asking the question, how do we do church? Like, how do we be the church? What does that look like? And there's some tension there. There's some conflict, just like there's conflict in any organization that tries to figure out what's the best thing to do. And one of the main conflicts that arose was there were some people who had been Jews their whole life. They've been raised learning the Torah, following the prophets, learning all the history of Israel. And they believed that to become a Christian, you first had to become a Jew. You had to go through all of the things that make you a Jew. You had to observe all the Jewish holidays and Jewish law. And then once you become a Jew, then you can become a Christian. You can become a follower of Jesus. But at the same time, there were Gentiles, people who did not grow up Jewish, who began to hear the teachings of Jesus. They began to give their lives to Jesus. They began to follow his teachings. And they said, no, we don't have to do all of that. We're not becoming Jews. We're becoming Christians. We're following Jesus' teachings. And so there was a great deal of conflict about this. And in this passage in Galatians, Paul is talking about a conflict that he had with Peter. He said, but when Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him to his face, for what he did was very wrong. When he first arrived, he ate with the Gentile believers who were not circumcised. But afterwards, when some friends of James came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of criticism from those people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. And as a result, other Jewish believers followed Peter's hypocrisy, and even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. And Peter is called out for his sin here, his sin of hypocrisy. And that hypocrisy of being so concerned about what other people think of me that I don't do what I know is right. Paul said I had to confront him to his face. I had to get in his face and tell him how wrong he was, because his sin was not just affecting him. His sin was affecting other people, and it was leading other people astray because Peter was so afraid of being criticized that instead of doing something that he knew was not wrong, he knew it was not wrong to associate with the Gentiles and to eat with them and to teach them and to bring them into a relationship with Jesus. He knew that wasn't wrong. But because he stopped doing that, because of the fear of criticism, Paul says that's hypocrisy, and your hypocrisy is leading other people astray. And we see examples over and over again about how sin, whether it be the sin of hypocrisy, the sin of greed, the sin of judgmentalism, the sin of laziness, the sin of whatever, you name it, that sin doesn't just affect us, it affects other people. And God hates sin because sin brings death to his children. And so Paul tells this story of Peter and the way that his sin affected him and this whole community. And make no mistake about it, we hold on to sin. And we hold on to sin because it's comforting. Because I know that whenever I feel bad, this particular sin will make me feel better. Whether it be gossip, if I can talk bad about someone else, that makes me feel a little bit better. And so I'm going to kind of hold on to that. If I can count my stacks of money higher than their stacks of money, I feel a little bit better about myself. So I'm going to hold on to greed. If I can compare myself and my own righteousness to someone else who I know struggles with things that I don't struggle with, then I can judge them, and I can find them wanting, and that makes me feel a little bit better about myself. Whatever the sin is, whether the sin of lust, the sin of indulgence, all of those sins, we hold on to them because they bring us some kind of comfort. And if we're going to start saving people, we have to let go of our sin, because the sin is leading us to death, and it's going to cause us to lead other people to death. So sin is one thing that we need to let go of, but there's another thing that I think sometimes we overlook that we need to let go of, and that's preconceived notions. And sometimes we believe that we are holding on to something good. All right? Whenever we talk about sin, we can all agree, yeah, let go of your sin. Sin is bad. But sometimes there's things that we hold on to that we believe are good. And maybe they are good. But maybe God's asking us to let go of something good so that he can give us something better. I'm going to tell you a story. Some of y'all might have heard this. I think this is a preacher story. It's probably not even true. It's just made up to illustrate something. So preachers do that sometimes. But I love it, and it illustrates this point perfectly. There's a father and his daughter. Daughter's about 3-4 years old. And they decide one day they're going to go to the grocery store, save mom a trip. And so they get in the car, they go to the grocery store, they get all the groceries, and as they're walking out, there's all those little 25-cent little toy dispensers or gum dispensers, whatever it is. They have them all lining the doors. And so as they're walking out, the daughter looks up at Dad and says, "Dad, can I have a quarter to put in the machine?" And so he says, "Sure." He just got some change back from the register. He didn't want it in his pocket anyway, so he gave it to her. She put it in, and a little plastic egg pops out, and she opens the egg, and inside is this plastic string of pearls. All right, 25-cent fake jewelry pearls. And she loves them. All right, to her, they are the most beautiful thing that she has ever seen. And she puts them on because they remind her of the pearls that her mom wears, and she feels so pretty, just like mom wearing these pearls. And she wears them everywhere. She sleeps in them, she eats in them, she bathes in them, she wears them to school, she wears them to play outside. She never takes them off. And after about a year, Dad comes into her room, he's tucking her in for bed one night, and he says, "I really love that necklace of yours." And she goes, Thank you, Daddy, I love it too, it's very pretty. And he says, "Can I have it?" She says, "No, this is my necklace. I love this necklace. You can't have it, it's for me." And he goes, "Okay, well, I just thought I'd ask." And the next night, he comes in to tuck her in, and he asks her again. He says, "Can I have that necklace?" And she says, "No, you can't have my necklace, Daddy. This is my necklace. I love it." And over again, for the next however long, every night as he's tucking her in, he asks her, "Can I have that necklace? Can I have that necklace?" And then the answer is always, "No, you can't have my necklace. No, you can't have my necklace." And the whole time, this girl's holding on to this 25-cent piece of jewelry, not knowing that the night that she decides to say yes and give that to her father, he's got a string of real pearls that he's bought her. And she's holding on to something cheap and fake because she thinks it's good, but the dad has something better for her. And sometimes there's things that we hold on to, thinking that they are good. And to her, those pearls were good. They were pretty. And sometimes we hold on to things like that too that might be good. Nothing wrong with them. Those pearls weren't hurting anyone. Those fake pearls weren't hurting anyone. And we hold on to those things because we think it's the best thing. I mean, God's saying, if you'll give me that, if you'll let go of that, I have something even better for you. I'm reminded of an interaction that Jesus had with Peter in Matthew chapter 16. Y'all have probably read this before. But Jesus is talking to his disciples. He's in the middle of his ministry, and he's getting to some of his harder teachings. All right, when Jesus first started, that's when we have the big crowds, thousands of people that are being fed and following him everywhere. And as his teachings get a little bit more difficult, the crowds start to dwindle. All the way to the point where even the 12 aren't standing beside him whenever he goes to the cross, because the cross is a hard teaching. And so he's in the middle of some of these harder teaching, and he asks his disciples, he says, in Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. All right, let me slow down and say that again. I was told last time I preached that I give the scripture references too quickly, so I'm going to slow down. I listen to you when you talk. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 13, it says, "When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do people say the Son of Man is?' And they replied, 'Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets.' 'But what about you?' Jesus asked. 'Who do you say that I am?' Simon Peter answered, 'You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God.'" He got it. He figured it out. He knew who Jesus was. He knew he was the Messiah. And that's a big deal. The Messiah is a big deal because the Messiah is not just some guy that's going to come and do something pretty neat. The Messiah is the Savior. He is the chosen one, the promised person that God said, "I'm going to send someone and he's going to make everything right that is wrong right now. He's going to fix it all." This is the moment that not just Peter has been waiting for his whole life, but that Israel has been waiting for centuries. They've been waiting for the Messiah. And what they thought the Messiah was a warrior king. They thought that the Messiah was going to raise up an army and he was going to kick Rome out, and Israel was going to be reestablished as this kingdom. The throne of David was going to be brought back to full glory, and that's what they were waiting for. They were waiting for someone to liberate them from their oppressors. And Jesus said, "I'm the Messiah, but don't tell anyone." Because he knew what people thought the Messiah was going to be. He knew that as soon as people thought the Messiah was here, that they were going to be taking up arms. There was going to be violence. There was going to be death. And he wasn't wanting that. What Jesus was doing was showing people what you think the Messiah is different than what it actually is. Let me show you the real way. And so he tells this story. He tells them, "Don't tell anyone." And in the next verse, in verse 21, it says, "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life." And Peter, who had figured this out, who knew who Jesus was, who knew he was the Messiah, he pulled Jesus aside from everyone. He said, "Jesus, come over here." He says, you can't talk like that. You're the Messiah. I would never let that happen. I'm ready to fight and die to protect you. You're the Messiah. The Messiah can't die. Don't stop saying that. You're confusing everyone. And Jesus replies to him, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." And Jesus tells Peter, "Look, I know what you think the Messiah is. And your dedication to the Messiah, your willingness to follow and to serve the Messiah, that's a good thing. But your preconceived notion of what the Messiah is going to cause you to miss what I'm actually doing." And sometimes I wonder if we have done that too. If there are things in our life that we believe are good and that are good, but because we have in our minds an idea that this is the way things are supposed to be, and we hold on to that so tight that maybe we're holding on to some fake pearls when God has something better in store for us. And one of the most powerful questions that I think we can ask ourselves, and if you were in the adult class earlier on this year, whenever I got to teach in there, you heard me ask this question. One of the most powerful questions that I think we can ask ourselves is, might I be wrong? And that's a scary question because we don't want to be wrong. But if we cannot ask ourselves that question, then there's really no chance for us to ever grow. Because if we're not wrong, then we know everything already. There's nothing more for us to learn, and so there's no way for us to grow. But if we can say, might I be wrong, and actually look at things with an open mind, look at new ideas and new opportunities and say, that's not what I thought it was going to look like. That's not what I think it should look like. But might I be wrong about that? And be willing to enter into the uncomfort of unsurety and step into that and wade through it. Maybe God has something better for us than what we are holding on to. I'm looking around. I'm not sure how many are in here. I saw more in first service, but I'm going to ask anyone who is 18 years old or younger who's in here, stand up. Don't come up here. Just stand up where you are. Stand up where you are. It's all right. Y'all can stand up. All right. These are some of the young people in our church. All right. How many of you would be willing to let go of something that you loved so that if you knew that that meant that these people would come to know Jesus more real, more closely? Would you be willing to give up something of yourself so that these people could have a relationship with Jesus? 5 or 6 of y'all are? There you go. I would. I'd be willing to let all this burn if it meant that I could save my children. I'd be willing to give up anything because guess what? I'm saved. I know it. I live in the confidence of that salvation. I live out of the confidence of that salvation. But there's some people out in the world that aren't. And if there's something that I can give up to help these people come to Jesus, then I'm going to give it up. And y'all just raise your hand. Y'all can sit down. Y'all just raise your hand, so I'm going to hold you to that. Because all of us probably have something that we need to let go. And I don't know what it is. If it's sin, let it go. If it's pride, let it go. If it's a preconceived notion of this is the way things should be, maybe be willing to let that go too. If it means that we're going to reach new people. Because I don't want to be standing in front of God holding all the things that I held on to and showing him, no, these are important, God. This is important. These are the things that are important. And I don't want him to look at me and say, no, my children are important, and you missed it. Just like the people who had been waiting their whole life for the Messiah, people that had been waiting centuries for the Messiah, the most significant event, most important event in all human history, and they missed it because they weren't willing to change how they thought it was going to be, how they thought that it should be. And they ended up crucifying the person that came to save them. And I don't want to be like that. I need to let some things go. I think we all need to let some things go. And we're going to sing an invitation song here in just a second. And if you have never been to church before, or if you're new to church, the language invitation song kind of sounds weird. And so let me explain it. Basically, we're going to sing a song. And during that song, we invite you to come forward. And there's a lot of reasons you might want to come forward. If you have a prayer request, you want for us to pray with you. If you want to speak to an elder, if there's something you need an elder to help you with, we're going to have elders around the building, out in the foyer, up here. You can come and ask an elder of our church to pray with you. And more importantly than anything, if you have not let go of your life so that you can give it to Jesus, and you want to do that today, to come forward and to give yourself to Jesus in baptism, we invite you to come and do that today too. And all those things are available to you as we come, if you'll come as we stand and sing.